Hey everyone, in this video, today I will be explaining about S3. So let me give you one example. Like let's suppose you have thousands or millions or unlimited amount of files that you want to store somewhere. You cannot store in laptop or desktop or phone anywhere because it has a storage limit, and because of that you cannot store complete all of your files. Right. So what you can do is that you can store in S3 because S3 provides you unlimited data storage, meaning you can store any amount of data, any amount of any size, unlimited amount of data in S3. So, so this is what we are going to talk about. So S3 is a cloud storage service provided by AWS. It allows users to store and retrieve any amount of data from anywhere at any time. And S3 is also highly durable, secure, and designed in such a way that it can scale automatically as your data grows. So what is S3? What does S3 consist of? So you need to remember two things. So S3 consists of object and a bucket. So object is nothing but the file, objects are nothing but a file, and bucket is nothing but a folder. So you can remember this way, this terminology. File, folder. So file is object, folder is bucket. So object consists of data plus metadata. So metadata is basically the information about the object. So object can store up to 0 bytes to 5 TB. And you can store unlimited number of objects inside the bucket. So objects are stored inside the bucket. That's the main key point that you need to remember. And the name of the bucket should be globally unique across all AWS account. So the bucket URL looks something like this. So you need to have there's a bucket name in the bucket URL. So coming to the advantage of Amazon S3. So remember this way. So when you create a bucket, the name of the bucket should be unique because that unique name of the bucket generates a unique DNS address for that bucket. And and while you st- and then storing the data in the bucket is basically like the bucket can store an infinite amount of data. You can upload the files as much as you want into an AWS S3 bucket. There's no maximum limit to store the files. Each object can store up to 5 TB of data. Each object can be stored and retrieved by using unique developer assigned keys. And you can also download the files from the bucket. And you can also give permission for anyone who wants to access your bucket. For example, you can set some permission for users who wants to download the data from your bucket or wants to upload the data into your bucket. And you can give this permission by using access control list or bucket policies. And standard interfaces is when you're running an application and the application or the program wants to automatically upload those files in your S3 bucket. It can be done by using this interfaces like REST interface and SOAP interfaces. So coming to security, Amazon S3 offers security features like protecting unauthorized users from accessing your data. So how S3 stores data? So like I said, every object stores in S3 consists of key. Key is nothing but the name of the object. Value is nothing but the actual data or the file content inside the bucket. The version ID is basically the unique ID of the object. Metadata is nothing but the information of the object. And you can have some resources like additional information like actual control list, and you can set permission like you can allow or deny access towards this object. So this structure makes the S3 simple and yet powerful. So yeah, like I explained before, the bucket bucket is nothing but the folder, and there's no limit to how many objects that you can store inside the bucket, and the bucket name should be unique across all the AWS customers. And you cannot store bucket inside another bucket. And coming to object, so objects are nothing but the files which are stored inside the bucket, which include data and the metadata. And coming to region, so when you're creating a bucket, you need to choose a region which is closer to your location. The why? Because it reduces latency, it reduces the cost, optimize your performance, and there's certain standards that you have to meet, like the rigor requirements. So that's the reason why you need to choose a region which is closer to your location, and the data stays in that region unless you want to move it. So coming to data consistency model, so there's read after write consistency and there's eventually consistency model. So so let me explain in the simple words. Read after write consistency is basically like when you're uploading a file inside the bucket, the changes is immediately reflected upon in the bucket. And whereas eventually consistency model is when, like when you're deleting a file from the bucket, it will take time for the changes to get reflected upon, but eventually it will get reflected upon. So there's some delay for that. There's some delay, like when you're deleting an object and it takes time to get reflected upon. So bucket so buckets are the universal namespace, that is, the bucket name must be unique. So if you're uploading an object in the S3 bucket, and how do you know that it is successful? So when we receive a HTTP 200 code, that's when uploading an object to the S3 bucket went successful. So S3 IA, S3 reduced redundancy storage are the storage class. We'll come to that later. And And encryption is of two types, that is client-side encryption and the server-side encryption. So when you're uploading a file, either you can encrypt your file before uploading that file to the S3 bucket, or the AWS can automatically encrypt your files. So this is called server-side encryption. So access to the bucket can either be controlled by a access control list or the bucket policy. And one important thing that you need to remember is that buckets are private, and all the objects which are stored inside the buckets are private. So coming to the storage classes. So you have different types of storage classes. One is S3 standard, S3 standard IA, S3 standard one zone IA, and S3 glacier. So so what so S3 standard. So it's a default storage class, and you use it when you're accessing your data frequently. Like, so you store them as the standard, and it has multiple availability zones. So it is low in latency and it is quickly accessible. So yeah, so you can use it when you're storing images, videos, backup, websites, and mobile app. So for example, so if you're running a website and that stores images, videos, CSS files in this, you can store them in S3 standard so the user can get fast access. Or if you're editing a video project daily, you can keep it in the standard S3 standard so that you can access them quickly. So coming to S3 standard IA. So this is best used when you're not accessing that data frequently. So you can store them in S3 standard infrequent access. For example, like you can store your old college assignments or your old photo that you check once in every few months. Or another example that I can think of is when the company stores an old employee documents which which is rarely accessed but needs to be stay safe. So you must keep this object for at least 30 days. So one zone IA meaning SA standard, one zone infrequent access. So the data so the infrequent access of data that you store, you only store in one availability zone. That's one big advantages because because something happens to one availability zone, uh, uh, is something that happens to the availability zone that you store in, and if that gets destroyed, all your data gets lost because you're just storing in one availability zone. That's the one big disadvantage because in S3 standard and S3 standard IA, there are many availability zones. So if something happens to that availability zone, the other so the data is secure in other availability zone. But yeah, one zone IA is much cheaper compared to standard IA. So you can use it as secondary backup, and it also it supports lifecycle policies. So coming to the S3 Glacier, it's like if it's like if you're not if you're using your data once in every year, you can store in S3 Glacier. So S3 Glacier is really cheap compared to other storage classes, and it is designed for long-term storage and if you and for archiving. So it is you, for example, the use case that you can use this for long-term backup, or like if you want to store the historical records or like your tax records or like your like you can consider S3 Glacier. So there's different type of S3 storage. There's different type of S3 Glacier. One is like the standard one. You can store it up to 3 to 5 hours. You can store it. There's this bulk. There's this bulk way you can store it up to 5 to 12 hours. This is much cheaper than standard one. So yeah, what this is all about S3 Glacier. So thank you very much for watching this video. See you next time.